Bonjour, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming today. It's great to see you. I really appreciate everybody taking time out of their busy days to spend time with us here. I'm Adam Selipsky from Amazon Web Services. I've been with AWS for 8 years, which is about 1 year before we started launching our infrastructure services. So it's been great to be part of this over the past years. And I wanted to spend some time today talking to you a little bit about cloud computing, Amazon Web Services, and how we came to be into this business, because those are questions which we frequently get. But mainly to talk about what we're seeing in terms of how our customers are using cloud computing and building on top of AWS to help accomplish their business goals, to lower costs, get more agility, and get more innovation into their businesses. And hopefully we'll talk about some customer examples today, which will be meaningful or useful for you as you think about how to plan out your businesses. We'll also do some Q&A, so feel free to jot down any questions as we go along, and we'll have a chance at the end with the microphones to address any questions. Hopefully I'll know the answers to at least some of your questions. So I don't get this question that often anymore, but it still does come up from time to time as to how did Amazon get into this business? How do we get into cloud computing? So I think first it's useful to understand that Amazon really thinks of itself as having three main customer segments, if you will. We have our retail business, and hopefully some of you are familiar with the retail operations of Amazon. So obviously we've got tens, it's actually hundreds of millions of active customer accounts. We operate in many countries around the world now with big physical operations, and I'm sure you all understand that. And then in around the year 2000, and this is important as you start then thinking about cloud computing, in around the year 2000, the company actually did something very controversial. We actually decided to open up our technology and our website, our web traffic, to third parties. So you had Amazon, which was doing its thing, and then we said, hey, we're going to go run some big websites. So we run marksandspencer.com, and we run bebe.com, and some other big websites. And we actually let them on our website so that all the traffic is exposed, all the consumers are exposed to the offerings of all of the different vendors who sell things. And a lot of people thought, well, how can you do that? Isn't it going to cannibalize your existing business? And we decided, look, people are going to find what they want to find, and if they can find it on Amazon, then it's better than finding it somewhere else. So what's important for today is the fact that we were able to do it from a technological standpoint, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. But you can see the evolution to then our third customer segment, which is developers and IT departments, which is the business of Amazon Web Services. And obviously we have infrastructure solutions in the cloud for all sorts of different applications. And at this point we have hundreds of thousands of customers in over 190 countries around the world. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this evolution, how we were able, from a technological perspective, to go from our first business, which was retailing books, to running really the first and the biggest cloud computing platform. So we launched this business really 7 years ago with the launch of S3, the simple storage service. So we've been at this quite a while in production with paying customers. And I really don't get this question very often anymore, but we used to get the question a lot of what does this have to do with selling books? I don't understand how this helps you sell more books. And the answer is that it has absolutely nothing to do with selling more books. But the same technology that we built at the beginning of Amazon and going forward to run the retail operation, it's the same people and the same underlying technologies which enabled us to build this cloud computing business. So more specifically, We launched about 7 years ago, but even at the time, in 2006 when we launched, it turns out that we had actually been working on our cloud computing business without knowing it for about 10 years at that point. So I mentioned this third-party seller business to run these other websites. Well, it turns out we had to do a lot of work to take this big technology platform that we built in the late 90s and to actually tear pieces of it apart so that other companies could use it. Like most internet applications built in the 90s, it was built as one big single application, not as a series of things that you could hook into. So we spent around the year 2000, we spent quite a bit of time really trying to tear pieces of this apart so that our partners could interact with different pieces of Amazon. And that's a very hard thing to do and took us several years. But once we had done it, it made our entire platform more flexible and much easier to use for everybody. The other thing that happened was Amazon itself was after a much more flexible, much more scalable, much more nimble internal IT environment. So one of the real core values of Amazon is innovation, and we talk about inventing for our customers or inventing on behalf of our customers. And this was probably also around the year 2000, 2002, the company was very unhappy, dissatisfied with the speed of innovation. And so we did a bunch of internal survey work, and we learned something very interesting. And that was that our internal development teams were spending up to 70% of their time not adding value to their customers, but rather worried about building and provisioning infrastructure. So that means the ordering team was spending up to 70% of their time not worrying about ordering. The personalization team was spending up to 70% of its time not worried about personalization. Instead, these teams were building servers, provisioning databases, partitioning databases, scaling databases, rescaling databases, worried about storage, worried about pages going off in the middle of the night because the infrastructure was down. And by the way, none of our customers care about none of those things. It adds no value to the Amazon retail customer. So what we did is we set out to reverse that 70-30 to 30-70. We wanted those teams to be spending 70% of their time, at least, actually adding value to customers. And only 30% of their time worried about this undifferentiated, heavy lifting. And so we thought, well, how are we going to do this? And so we took all of the most senior engineers in the company, and there were these long offsites and a lot of soul searching. And eventually we decided that what we really needed was a shared infrastructure, a shared platform for doing IT. And after a lot of talk, we started thinking, well, you need a compute element, and you need storage, and almost every application needs a database. And so these became, the first foundational elements of what was later going to become AWS. So we decided that we needed this as a company. That the way for us to innovate and the way for us to scale was to build this for ourselves. But at the same time, something else very interesting was happening. So Amazon actually released its first web service, probably about 10 years ago now, which was focused around e-commerce. It basically exposed our e-commerce catalog, the pricing information, the recommendations, all of the images. We exposed all of those as web services. And we thought it was kind of interesting, and we thought some developers might be interested in it. There was an explosion of interest. Tens of thousands of developers grabbed these e-commerce APIs so they could work with them. So they could set up websites that drove traffic to Amazon, and they would get commissions or to use the images for their own purposes. And we frankly were very surprised at the high level of interest in these APIs. So we thought, all these developers are interested in these APIs from Amazon. And Amazon itself has these really difficult infrastructure challenges, and we think we need to build this big shared platform of infrastructure for ourselves. And we used to be a startup, and we had these problems. We're a Fortune 1000 company. This is back in 2002. And we have these problems. And we're going to be a Fortune 500 company in a couple of years, and we're still going to have these problems. So what we realized was that these were universal problems. These are problems that every IT department, every internal customer group, marketing organization, manufacturing organization, whatever it is, in pretty much every company faces these same problems. And so we realized that there was actually a real business opportunity here because there was a real customer need. And it was really taking all that information together, which led us to say, hey, there's a real customer need, and we're going to go build an external business and focus a lot of people on building this for a new customer set for IT departments and developers, both small and large. And that was really the early seed of the idea for how we decided that AWS was going to happen. So we set out to work, and we started building teams and started building some of these early services. And so if you fast forward to today, what we have is 7 years of actually running paid services in production with real life customers. We have over 37 services today. I won't take you through each one of these. But really, it's a pretty broad and deep platform today. So obviously, compute is a big part of that, and we have Amazon EC2, which is the Elastic Compute Cloud. After we launched the Elastic Compute Cloud in late 2006 is when the term cloud really became a popular way to talk about these types of services in the industry. A lot of networking services, obviously security and privacy are very important. So we have various different ways of doing a dedicated or private networking. Storage, very important for any application. We have several different storage services, as well as a content delivery network, a CDN. I mentioned databases. There need to be a lot of different database solutions to run these types of applications effectively. So we have relational database offerings. We also have non-relational database service. We also have a data warehousing solution. So a lot of different customer needs in that area. And then a lot of application services which run at a slightly higher level that we've built. I won't take you through all of those. And then importantly, a lot of management capabilities. A management console, so it's a visual interface into AWS for people who don't want to use the APIs or the command line tools. Software development kits, SDKs, in multiple languages, .NET, Ruby, Java, et cetera, and various other capabilities. And of course, support offerings and professional services and training around all of that, because a lot of this is new, and a lot of IT departments need to kind of acquire new skills and get up to speed on some different things. So I mentioned innovation and how important at Amazon innovation is, and that's when we get up every day, we come to work with the attitude of we have to invent today, we have to create new things for our customers. And why is that in AWS? Well, it's because if you take a step back, really what companies are doing, you can really see it happening is preparing to move much of their IT into the cloud. And if you look at everything in the last 30 years, which has happened inside of data centers, as more and more of that happens in the cloud, you can imagine how much work we feel we still have to do. We've built 37 services. I think the platform is very solid today, but we clearly have a lot more work to do in the future. And so we really bring an attitude of we have to innovate very, very quickly. So you can see the number of these are major features or new services that we've built, and you can see that number is just going up and up every year. Last year, we were almost at 160 major new feature or service updates. And that's only accelerated in this year. We're already up to 53 in the first quarter of 2013. And I'll make one of the promises I'll make is you will keep seeing that kind of accelerating pace of innovation from us as we go along. We get a lot of questions around, well, where is this infrastructure? Where can we use it? So at this point, we have 9 regions worldwide. Now let me just talk about an AWS region for a moment. A region is not a single data center. We never build a single data center because that is not reliable, and any data center can have a problem. Any data center can go down. So we always build a cluster, multiple data centers all together that work as a single unit. So if you store an object with us, we will break it up and store different copies or pieces of the object in multiple data centers. And if there was ever a problem with a data center, we will replicate the object somewhere else. We keep multiple copies. And this way our customers can architect for very high resilience and redundancy and very, very, very high performance for their applications. So a region for us is a pretty big deal. We have 9 of them, several in the US. We have an EU region, Singapore, Japan, and Latin America, Brazil. Another important fact about our regions is that each one operates independently. So a customer with an API call or using the management console says, I'm using the EU region, or I'm using the US East region. And that's where they put their data, and that's where their compute resources are. And they can use multiple regions if they want to. There's nothing to stop them. But the point is, it's a customer action. And if you put your data in the EU, it stays in the EU. We don't just move that data. There's no metadata that floats across the world. Putting data in a location is a customer action. You control it, and we don't move that data to another region. So just in terms of the scale at which we operate today, I thought one interesting measure I can share is that if you take Amazon.com, the worldwide retail business, in 2003, it was just over a $5 billion per year company, $5.2 billion. We had almost 8,000 employees, and we had a lot of servers. So today, AWS, on average, every day of the year, adds enough new capacity to service Amazon.com when it was a $5 billion a year company. So on average, we're adding enough new capacity 365 days per year to service a new Amazon. So now why is this important? Well, it's important because of the scale that it gives us. And with that scale, it drives our costs very far down. We can afford to invest in reliability, in innovation to drive costs down further. And also customers who use us know that we're not going to run out of capacity. Any one customer is going to be a very tiny fraction of what our worldwide customer base is doing. And so it's usually very easy for us to serve the capacity needs of any one customer, even if they're a sizable enterprise with a significant infrastructure footprint. As I mentioned before, at this point, we do have hundreds of thousands of customers. Our enterprise base is very diverse. It ranges from Shell, who runs many applications on us, a lot of other European-based companies, FC Barcelona, which I understand in France may be a bit of a sensitive subject. Sorry. To Ericsson. So you can see the companies on the screen. A lot of U.S. and Asian companies as well. Samsung does a lot on AWS. We can talk about the NASDAQ. Banks in Spain, such as Bank Inter. So it's in Australia, Commonwealth Bank, of course, Orange and Schneider Electric, and we'll talk about a couple of these in more detail. But it's a very broad base at this point. And we made a decision when we built this platform. Some people thought we should build very, very kind of specific use case type of platform. And we decided that we were going to build a very broad platform that let customers pretty much do whatever they wanted on it. So if you, again, you think about those building blocks, compute, storage, database, that pretty much describes any application. And so it's not surprising that what you have today is a very broad and heterogeneous, diverse set of use cases on AWS. So we mentioned FC Barcelona. They host their website and all of their social media on AWS. Unilever is one of many life sciences and pharmaceutical type of companies who are doing very sophisticated analytics on AWS. In their case, they're doing gene sequencing, which is a fascinating use case. And we have many other companies like them, such as Bristol Myers Squibb, who are doing clinical trial simulations on AWS. So it's a very big use case for the cloud and a great use case. NASA is another great example. NASA Jet Propulsion Labs controls the robot that they put on Mars, the Mars rover Curiosity. So it's basically a big minivan that they put on the surface of Mars. It's very expensive. And they control much of that mission data and all of the photography and the images and stitching them together. Many of those missions are done on top of AWS. So that really is a mission-critical application for sure. So the applications range from web apps to big data to very traditional back office enterprise applications such as running SAP and Oracle and different Microsoft applications. So a very broad and diverse use case. So I thought we could spend a little time talking about sort of the whys behind this. So obviously cloud is this big buzzword and everybody uses it way too much. But there are reasons for that, and the reasons really are the core benefits that using a cloud, whether it's AWS or somebody else, there are real benefits of running in the cloud that we believe you only get in the cloud. And I thought I'd give you our perspective on the benefits that our customers are telling us that they're seeing from this new way of doing IT. So the first is to be able to trade capital expense for variable expense. So there are some companies who really do not have significant constraints around IT expense, but most IT administrators, most CIOs that I talk with are facing limited IT budgets, trying to do more and more with a fixed budget. And for many companies, the ability to not have to spend that capital up front and instead be able to pay as they go, to use variable expense for IT is very, very powerful. And we see a lot of companies excited by the fact that it costs them $0, €0, to get started. So the second is, okay, great, you can pay as you go, but if you have to pay a lot, then that's not very useful. So we think that the second thing that the cloud enables is for that variable expense to be low and for the prices to be cheap. So IDC, the analyst firm, actually did a very in-depth study. They spent months studying about 10 or 15 major enterprises running in the cloud across many different industries: pharmaceutical, manufacturing, media companies. And they actually found that the cost of running these applications in the cloud was 70% cheaper than running those same applications on premises, in-house for those corporations. So it was a 70% saving. So the effect can be, now it varies a lot. Sometimes it's 90%, sometimes it's 25%. I mean, it clearly varies a lot. But if you look at some of our customers, Foursquare, for example, is saving 50% of their analytical costs by running in the cloud. Samsung saved $34 million by running their smart TV and smart hub applications in the cloud. And Orange in the UK, Orange Digital, saved over a couple of years $3 million in their hosting costs. So that's actually an interesting example. Orange Digital had grown their, through acquisitions and had a patchwork, a real mishmash. I'm not sure what the French translation of mishmash is, but of web infrastructure. And so they were looking for a way to get that under control, both for cost as well as for performance purposes. And so they consolidated all of that UK-based digital web infrastructure onto AWS. And now they run all of those applications and much of the social media around it on AWS. And particularly on Saturday afternoons when folks want to get the football scores, the traffic to those websites spikes way up. And it's very important to have a very scalable and elastic web infrastructure. And instead of having to build for that peak, they're able to scale up and scale down and save a lot of money as a result. So building on that point, the third major benefit of running in the cloud is not having to be in the guessing game, not having to guess at how much capacity you're going to use. Whether you're a small company starting up or a large enterprise planning out new projects, new IT initiatives, in the old world, you kind of have this chart here on the left where you have to make a guess. And you either build too much and you've wasted a whole lot of infrastructure, or you guess too low, you're conservative, and it turns out that you don't serve your customers very well because you under-provisioned the infrastructure. So imagine a world where supply and demand actually, within minutes, look the same as each other. And you can turn capacity on and off, with an API call or with a visual web interface. And that can mean a few servers, it can mean hundreds of servers, it can mean literally turning off thousands of servers on a few minutes' notice, or turning them on for that matter. So this is a big difference, has big implications in how companies plan out and then utilize their IT. Very fundamental change. And as a result, and frankly, even though companies save a lot of money using the cloud, and I guarantee 99 out of 100 companies at least will save a lot of money using the cloud. But I actually do not believe personally that is the most exciting benefit of using AWS or using the cloud, any cloud provider. I think the most important piece is the increase in speed and agility that it brings. So again, in the old world, many companies take literally weeks to provision infrastructure. Very common scenario. And what you have with the cloud is the ability to provision new infrastructure in minutes. Again, you've got no capital that you need to spend. You just need whatever compliance and policy infrastructure that you have internally, and then your internal customers are free to, within that, to provision new capacity. It's a very different way of operating. And so you have some great examples. News International, for example, who's moved a large percentage of their servers already to AWS and plans to move more into the cloud over the next couple of years. They've gone from 2 months to just a couple of days to get new things up and running. And Lionsgate, the Hollywood movie and entertainment company, again, have gone from weeks down to hours for new deployments. And Lionsgate actually runs much of their SAP infrastructure on AWS. So at the end of the day, what does this mean? What can you do with this? And I think the most exciting thing is around innovation and experimentation. So when it's fast and when it really doesn't cost you anything to innovate, what happens is that people innovate. People are freed up to do that. At Amazon, we talk a lot about failing fast or failing quickly, which is the ability to try a lot of experiments and to just shut down the ones that don't work. And you assume that many of them are going to fail. And it's okay if they fail. It's just the price of being an innovator is to try a lot of different things. And if you can not have penalties when those experiments don't work, then people are naturally just going to experiment a lot more at very low cost. And I think this is probably the single most important thing that's driving large enterprises to get in the cloud, is to find ways to be faster, to be more innovative, and to have their employees feel free to do that experimentation. So there's a lot of examples of that. RFF is an interesting example here in France. So they're planning out a lot of rail routes, physical routes, including new TGV routes between France and Spain. And you can imagine that is a difficult endeavor. There's figuring out population densities, there's figuring out noise factors, there's a lot of infrastructure implications, political implications. So they're doing these big data simulations on AWS to help them actually plan out these routes. And as they go forward, they're going to be able to take those applications and open them up to the public and let people understand where these routes are going to run and to comment on that decision. And so it will have a real physical impact on how cities and towns interact with these rail routes. Very interesting application. So kind of the fifth benefit of using the cloud, which I mentioned briefly before, is the ability to just stop spending money on things that, again, don't benefit your customers. So you think about all that stuff which happens inside the guts of a data center, and most of it does not add value to most of your customers. And so if you can focus your efforts and your talented engineers on running your applications and on how you're going to use this infrastructure, as opposed to actually building and maintaining the infrastructure and worrying about bandwidth contracts and things like that. It's a much better use of time for most IT organizations. And then finally, and this was a little bit of a surprise to me as we've built this business, many of our enterprise customers come to AWS partially because of the ability to deploy across the world, our global infrastructure. So we have 9 regions across the world, and many European companies want to go to Asia, many American companies want to go to Europe, Australian companies want to go to Europe. And the infrastructure is all the same in every region, so once you've built out whatever you're running in one region, you just do the same thing in another region. It should take minutes, maybe a couple days if you're doing testing. And that's very different than saying, gee, I want to go to Japan, let me start thinking about data centers and co-location facilities and so forth. It's fundamentally a different model of expanding globally. So just to summarize quickly, these benefits are replacing CapEx with operating expense, lowering the overall costs, not guessing at capacity, but instead being very elastic, the speed, the agility, and the ability to innovate, and focusing on things that differentiate your business, and then the ability to go global. And one thing I would just add is you see the word cloud attached to a lot of different things these days. Seems like every technology offering that's out there is now a cloud offering. I would just look at these characteristics, and I would just say, is the thing that I'm thinking about buying, or the thing that this technology company is talking to me about, does it do these things? And if it does these things, then it's probably a cloud offering. But if it doesn't do these things, then it's probably just kind of the same old infrastructure that people have been selling for a while with a new word on it. So this is one way, anyway, of thinking about and hopefully is helpful in evaluating a lot of these offerings that you'll see. So I thought it would be hopefully helpful to talk a little bit about the specifics of how some customers are actually using the cloud and the specific use cases that we're seeing. So I'll try and run through these just in a few minutes, then of course we'll leave time for questions at the end. So we definitely see some different patterns to the use that customers make of the cloud. One strategy is to, and this is very, very common, is to use the cloud for development and test environments. It's so easy to build up and then tear down development and test environments that you see people doing it all the time. We mentioned Lionsgate with their SAP infrastructure. The Tokyo Stock Exchange runs a lot of Oracle enterprise applications, and they've significantly reduced their cost by running that on AWS. On to big chemical companies like Galata Chemicals, who's taken 70% out of their operational costs by doing their SAP development and test in the cloud. Locally here, Lafarge is a good example. They actually started with AWS by doing development and test for their websites and their web applications in the cloud. And that actually went very well. So as it turns out today, they also run all of those websites in production on AWS as well. But again, they started out with development and test, which is a very common way to get started. So a second strategy that we often see is companies saying, okay, we've kind of got all this existing infrastructure and existing applications, and we're not sure what we want to do with that, but we're going to do new development in the cloud. It's kind of a cloud-first strategy. So we've seen a lot of companies building new applications specifically to run in the cloud. So one example of that is the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ's been an AWS customer for years, but they wanted to build a platform for financial services companies to run in the cloud. So the NASDAQ actually built a whole new offering. It's called FinCloud with a Q in the middle. And FinCloud is a platform that runs on AWS, but has all sorts of NASDAQ-built encryption and authentication and user verification that they are actually they're producing services for other financial services firms to use. So a lot of broker-dealer and trade brokerage operations for other companies that are now running on AWS in the cloud. So it's an example of really a whole new line of business, which is enabled by not having to worry about and build the underlying infrastructure, but just to focus on the application that they want to build. So it's faster to market, less expensive to run, and easier to manage. So lots of examples of that. The NASDAQ was one. Canal Plus is another example. They're running a lot of really innovative new customer applications on AWS, including Le Grand Journal, which is an iPad application. There are several other examples as well, but they're a good partner, and they're putting more and more of their web infrastructure in the cloud. It's been very interesting to partner with them on that. So a third strategy that's common is really companies saying, hey, we've got all these applications, we've got all this infrastructure. How can I use the cloud as part of that? And so we see a lot of companies trying to use the cloud to enhance or make their existing applications better. And so what that means is they've asked us to build a lot of capabilities that help them run really alongside with their existing infrastructure. So we've built networking capabilities so you can directly connect into AWS. We've made storage, back and forth and taking snapshots from on-premises and putting them into the cloud very easy. And that's going to be, I think, a more and more important use case going forward. So one example of that is Schneider Electric, obviously very, very large multinational industrial company. They have a very big global IT infrastructure presence, and they're not going to be getting rid of that infrastructure anytime soon. But they very much want it to run in the cloud as well. So they've actually, working with AWS, taken a whole series of applications and put them in the cloud, working with their local on-premises IT infrastructure at the same time. So they're currently serving 110,000 employees in over 100 countries, running a whole series of external web applications as well as a whole series of internal intranet-based applications in the cloud, very much in a hybrid environment of on-premise and running in the cloud. So a fourth strategy that we see is taking applications and saying, okay, you take a single application, I want a piece of that to run on-premise. And there are different reasons for that. But I want a lot of it or most of it to run in the cloud. Samsung, which is a significant AWS customer, is a good example of this. So they have these smart TV and smart hub applications, which is all the software applications which run on their newer lines of televisions. And this is a very global business. It runs on every continent, very fast growing, very high demand. They need it to be very reliable. And so they use AWS to serve up all of that application content and all of that data that goes down to all of those televisions. And yet there was a piece of it that they wanted to keep. They had built this infrastructure for doing the financial transactions around that. And they said, we don't really want to deal with moving those financial transactions off of our servers, and we know how to do it. And they didn't want to rebuild that for the cloud. So they just integrated it really in a single hybrid application where those financial transactions are done on-premise and the rest of the application delivery and the content for the applications all sits in the cloud. So it's actually pretty easy to knit or stitch that together. So again, locally, a lot of examples of that. Le Figaro is a good example. Like every other media company and every other publishing company, they're trying to figure out how do I go where my customers are going with their mobile devices. How do I monetize my content? Content's expensive to produce or to buy. And how do I make better use of that? So they actually built a very interesting series of iOS and Android applications. The core Figaro application for mobile devices runs on AWS, and they're able to serve their customers better and monetize their content better by running these applications in the cloud. So the fifth strategy that we see is, we talked a little bit about some companies who are not ready to actually migrate applications. So a lot of other companies are very much actively today migrating major parts of their infrastructure to the cloud. I have many CIO conversations these days about data center migration and companies who actually want to get out of the business of running data centers entirely. So News International, I mentioned briefly before, is an interesting example of that. They've already today migrated about 1/3 of their servers to the cloud. It's across many different types of applications, customer payments, content delivery, actual websites running in the cloud. And they've saved between £1 to £1.5 million per year. I'm sorry, in the past 2 years, running in the cloud. And they actually have a very explicit strategy to move 75% of their servers into the cloud out of their data centers over the next couple of years. So again, we're talking large, sophisticated organizations who are doing this migration. And they're doing it thoughtfully and in pieces and in waves as they're ready to move off of that hardware and as their applications become ready. But I think you'll see more and more of this over the next couple of years. It's becoming very common. And so Millesima is an example here in France, which is doing exactly this. So they're a retailer focused in wine, and they're actually running, I believe, 14 different e-commerce applications in the cloud. And these have an average transaction of €2,000. It's pretty good. And so the need for security, the need for availability, you don't want to give up an order, right? At an average order of €2,000. So it's very important for this to be a very high quality consumer experience. And by basically not having to worry about that infrastructure, they can focus on their application, they can focus on the wine, and the infrastructure just works. So it's a really fun example. And then finally, we've seen a number of companies who have said, you know what, we're just going to move. We're just going to move everything. We are in the cloud. So Netflix, it's obviously a Fortune 1000 company in the U.S. At nighttime in the U.S., 30% of the traffic, internet traffic going into households, 30% of household bandwidth in the US is Netflix. And they decided a few years ago that even though they're very good, very talented engineers, that they simply did not want to be in the infrastructure business. So they decided they were just going to move it. And over a couple-year period, they moved almost 100%, call it 98% of their infrastructure into the cloud, onto AWS. That's hundreds of middle-tier services and applications. They use tens of thousands of virtual servers on AWS in multiple regions and multiple availability zones. They're processing 70 billion events or requests hitting the systems every day. And so it's a very scaled, very complex application or series of applications, really, which run entirely in the cloud. And the good thing for them is they've been able to take their same developers, their same engineers, their same IT staff, and they've been able to focus them on innovating on top of this infrastructure. So it's not like they've gotten rid of any of those positions. They've simply repositioned them so that they're adding value at the application level or figuring out how to manage this infrastructure in a very flexible and reliable fashion, as opposed to worrying about building and maintaining the infrastructure itself. Actually, just in the interest of time, I'm actually going to stop there. I want to make sure we leave time for questions if people have them. So I will stop talking at you and give you a chance to talk if you have anything to ask.